My presentation is a short overview about Lars Levi Lestadiuss, who lived in 19th century in Sweden, in northern Sweden, and he was quite many-sided figure in Scandinavian church history. Lutheran pastor, revival preacher, and a scientist as well. And I took all these phenomena in this presentation. Generally speaking, church history knows that Lestadiuss launched a campaign in 1914 against that he considered sinful activities. Before all, the consumption of alcohol, the situation among Sami people, Lappi's original people, was very difficult at that time. And this Lestadiuss activity spread into Finnish Lapland and other northern regions as well. Theologically, Lestadian revival movement inside Swedish and Scandinavian people churches emphasized the important confession of sins and absolution of sins by this so-called power of keys. Here we can find very typical picture of Lestadiuss, and here we can find the area where this revival movement began and what was Lestadiuss area. Life and work. Lestadiuss was born in Jäckvik village, Arjeplog bergs in Swedish Lapland in the year 1800, and his father Karl Lestadiuss was descended from prominent family of clergyman. But he was not himself pastor. He had been employed at the Nasafel mine, and later he was pioneer farmer in Arjeplog. And they were not very rich people, quite poor people. And mother Anna Magdalena was daughter of pure pioneer farmer, and he was a very religious woman with pietistic ideas. Here was so-called Läseri movement, readers movement, that was very important. It was something like combination between Hermotinis, Moravians, and pietistic ideas inside Evangelical Lutheran Church. Lestadiuss' conditions at home was very difficult. Father's alcoholism and poverty of home make everyday life difficult. And that's why his half-brother Karl-Erik Lestadiuss, who was pastor, minister, took care of Lars Levi and the younger brother Petrus, who had born 2 years later, in Kvikkjokk parish. And he had possibility to attend to Härnösand High School, gymnasium, and later he began studies at the University of Uppsala at the Faculty of Theology. And after ordination he served a short time as pastor in Arjeplog, in home parish, and very soon he was nominated to vicar Kyrkohede in Karesuvanto, that was most northern parish in Sweden, in Swedish Lapland. And later he served vicar of Pajala parish until his death. He died 1861. This is general lines about his life. He was married with Britta Kaisa, who was a very strong woman. And here we see also Karesuvanto church building, where the revival began in the middle of 14th. Lestadiuss had many periods in his spiritual life, and he experienced so-called personal awakening and new birth in the beginning of 1844. And one very simple Lappish woman Mary of Lapland, so-called Mary of Lapland, Milla Clemensdottir, was a very important person in this process. He came from so-called readers' movement. And after this experience, Lestadiuss began very strongly preach repentance, but also forgiveness of sins. Law and gospel. Quite simple way, law and gospel. He took attention especially to many sinful lifestyle of Sami people, drunkenness and many kinds of bad habits among Sami people. Sami people are original Lappish people. And at the same time, he had very big influence in so-called Lapland missionary schools. He was responsible also these activities, and he put educated some lay people as people's teachers. And most famous of these teachers was Juhani Raattamaa, who was later a famous lay preacher, living in 1811 to 1899. And very important doctrinal point after awakening was so-called power of the keys, that converted people, believers, have right to proclaim Jesus' message and forgiveness and sins to each others. And Raattamaa find basic from some Luther text and especially from John 21, 22 and 24. You know these passages. A spiritual awakening began in the years 1845, 1846. And first a lot of people converted in Karesuvanto. And immediately this spiritual awakening spread into all northern areas of Scandinavia. And later, especially in the 1870s and 18s, it spread to large areas in Finland and later also outside Scandinavia as well. And the result was that Lestadian revival movement is the most largest people's revival movement born in Scandinavia. Still alive today, and it is today also an international movement. Of course, there has been many divisions that we cannot say that Lestadian movement is everywhere the same. There has been some divisions that is typical phenomenon in history or revival movements as well. Here we see some pictures about conservative Lestadian big summer services were attend every year approximately 70, 80, 90,000 people from different countries, but especially from Finland and Scandinavia, Sweden and America as well. It's the largest religious meeting in Scandinavia in the beginning of July. Okay. Lestadiuss was also not only Lutheran pastor and revival preacher, he was also scientist. First of all, he was botanist. He was expert of flora and fauna of Arctic region. And this interest of plant kingdom developed even in school years, especially these years that he spent in Kvikkjokk made impulses to his activities and interest of botanism. And as young man, he took part in some journeys botanical service. And he has many contacts with Swedish botanists, and he was expert of willows. He has many contacts to Professor Göran Wallenberg, and a total of 6,700 plants was collected by him. Even later, some plants were named according Lestadiuss in Arctic botanic area. Papaver Lestadianum, Arctic poppy, Carex Lestadianum, Arctic sedge. But he was, we know that another very famous botanist in Sweden was Linne, and he was following his footsteps as well. Another scientific interest was his contact with French scientists at the end of 1840s, before his personal conversion and his religious activities. Here was La Recherche, trip led by Joseph Gaimard into North areas, and Xavier Marmière was one of his scientists. And they make this trip to northern Scandinavia. Even they were in Svalbard. Lestadiuss do not took part in this Svalbard expedition, but he was guiding this in Lapland, this company. Other scientific interest. He had contact with hunting organization of Sweden, Svenska Jägareförbundet. Interest in geology, geological observations. He studied climate changes in Karesuvanto. But he was also labbokist and cultural anthropologist. And one of the famous results of his research was fragments of Lappish mythology. And during recent years, it has been published in English as well, 2002. And Lestadiuss was also not only preacher and ordinary priest, he was also theologian, and we can say that he had interest also into a philosophy of religion. And one example of this interest is his work Dårhusjånet, originally in Sweden, translated into Finnish, and recently published in English, The Lunatic, an insight into the order of grace. It is something like apology of his theology, and it is quite deep theological thinking, and it is somehow not only covers philosophy of religion, but it is something like apology of his ideas. It has been published in English 2015, and I can imagine how difficult work it has been to translator, who was Dr. Reverend Anders Strindberg. Anders Strindberg is a Swedish pastor who is serving in who has served in Missionsprovinsen. He is not Swedish church pastor, but Missionsprovinsen pastor, and is nowadays in California living. Later we can say that Lestadiuss' sermons has been published in many languages. Later we know that collection of sermons are called in postilla in Finnish. And these sermons has been published in Finnish, in Swedish, in Sami, Norwegian, English, German, Russian, and later years also in Estonian and Latvian language. And I know that one sermon has been published in the beginning of 13th in China, because one Lestadian group, so-called New Awakening, had their missionary activities. It was Finnish Missionary Society activity, but here was some special section for Lestadians. And some sermons has also translated into Dutch language, but not published. Here we see recently published Lestadiuss postil in Estonian. It is more than 100 years ago when the first postil in Estonia was published. Research focused on Lestadiuss has been published also not only in Scandinavian countries, but also in some other countries. Some Dutch researchers, cultural anthropologists and so on, have researched also Lestadianism as Sami phenomena. And here is one result of these research activities. Lestadiuss in Latvia, some pictures. The biography of Lestadiuss, Sauseja Bals, written by Ilas Blume, it was based on master's thesis. And here we see that also firstborn Lestadians has published also Lestadiuss postilla in Latvian language Prediikki. And we know that firstborn Lestadians has some activities in Latvia as well. Thank you for your attention.